In this episode, I am joined by Lorna Byrne, spiritual teacher and best-selling author of Angels in My Hair. Lorna describes her childhood in Ireland when she first began to see and interact with angels and souls of the dead, and recalls how she navigated these visionary experiences. Lorna discusses the different types of angels that she sees, as well as other beings such as souls of the deceased, land spirits, elementals, and more, and how others might learn to see as she does. Lorna also reflects on feeling the energy of a place, her lifelong experience of being different to others, unusual reactions people have towards her, and the importance of love, hope, and compassion. So without further ado, Lorna Byrne. Lorna Byrne, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be sitting here in Ireland. I'm not quite sure where you are at the moment, and just to be in conversation with you, chatting with you.
Yes, well, I'm also very delighted indeed to speak with you. I'm in Derbyshire, by the way, at the moment, on a canal boat. That's, in case you're wondering, what is this strange room? Some people do ask, am I in a shed? Have I been banished to the attic or something? No, it's a canal boat in Derbyshire.
That's actually beautiful because I love to be on the water. So I think you're blessed being on the water and doing your podcast from there.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Well, gosh, what a fascinating life you've had. You write in Angels in My Hair, I grew up an outsider. People could see that I was different and they just couldn't understand it. That aspect of my life has been very, very hard, and it still is today. People say I'm too trusting, too truthful for this world, but I cannot be any other way. The strange thing is that to be truthful in every way, in how you think and how you speak, and to be truthful to those around you is hard, and it does tend to isolate you. And you go on to say that the way people think about or look at me does affect me greatly, even now. Even though they may not know me or know what I do, they know that on some level I'm different. And you go on to describe that sometimes when people meet you and they don't know anything about what you do or your story and so on, they'll say to their friends afterwards, they'll remark, there's something different about her. Something, can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something odd. So I'm wondering if you might say a little bit something about that, particularly regarding your upbringing, your early life.
This is the first time I've been asked that question in such depth and detail. I suppose as a child, just being branded retarded, I was fairly dyslexic, but you have to remember in Ireland, no one knew anything really about that, so any child that showed any difficulties, they were branded as such. And yes, it was hard because, I've had not an education like yourself, but I've had a different type of education. I've been educated by the angels and God. They've literally taught me everything I know. And I suppose it was just as a child and a teenager, and even as a mother, how would I say, just, sometimes strangers would come up to you and ask you something, or, and I suppose maybe family in the sense, you were kind of just pushed to the back, in that way. Or in school, you were put in the back of the classroom and no one bothered with you. But I was learning all of the time, so I have to smile at that. I know I'm different, and in one way I can't quite explain it. People still today pass comment, and sometimes, maybe I'm working with someone, like I've been working with a scientist at the moment, and sometimes he would just look at me and he'd say, but how would you know that answer? You've no education, so it's just the knowledge and the wisdom that God and the angels have given me, and they've taught me how to, what would I say, maybe in a human way you would say, use all my senses. but to have them empowered in a different way. Like, I'm sure you just look around your room, you don't actually see there's a difference, or, they taught me how to, listen to my bird of love, and it was way in the forest, and they made me find my way to it, and it was only a baby bird, a tiny little thing, but how to separate sounds. So I suppose in that way I'm different, and probably so many other ways as well. But I'm only me. You see, everyone does say, why, sometimes they would say, why can't you be like everyone else? And I tell everyone, just be yourself. Don't try and be anyone else. Just be you, because the you is, what would I say? You're unique in every way, and I only can be me. I can't be anyone else. And I never even try to be anyone else. I don't even try to do anything like everyone else does. I actually can't. It just doesn't work, and I'd have to smile at that. I remember my dad, trying to get me to pick up a cup and a box the way he believed it should be picked up. And I couldn't fathom it whatsoever, and then I guess, seeing the angels physically as I do every day, and so much more. And they, in a sense, telling me all the time, reminding me when I was tiny, to keep it a secret, to say nothing, and even when my little brother, I still call him my little brother, but he was born before I was, when I was playing with him in front of the fire with the building blocks, and our hands touched, and it was like his hand went into mine and mine went into his, and you can imagine what that was like, just sparkles everywhere, just light. And I felt so much love, and I laughed. And that's when the angels told me, that I must keep it a secret and say nothing. And they told me at that time as well, that my brother, who I was playing with, was a soul. He had died before I was born. They told me quite a lot. But even that I kept as a secret. And even in the book Angels in My Hair, I've only put so much in. I haven't put everything in, because one thing God would say was, how would I say this, would hold me back, because it would be too much for mankind. And sometimes I do speak in a different kind of language, humanly, I don't understand why human beings, mankind, why you do what you do, and why you, what would I say? I don't know. It confuses me at times, in that way. So, and in a sense, how come you can't love? You can love, but you put limits on it, conditions on love. And I've been trying to, just telling people that love is all the emotions. What do you think you'd be like if you didn't have love? In that sense. And I suppose maybe just saying to people, like, I've had rabbis and ministers and bishops and priests and nuns from so many different religions. And just before the pandemic came, they started to come up to me and ask me, is God real? And I was literally shocked, because lots of them have gone to Oxford and different places. They would tell me, where they've been educated, or they're someone that's a professor in theology, if I'm saying the word right, and they ask me questions, and I'm looking at them, but surely you know this, you have studied, you understand. And they asked me the question, is God real? And I would tell everybody in the world, yes, God is real. And God has millions of names, and it's the one God. And in a sense, why wait until the moment your body ceases to exist to discover that God is real? Why not discover that now? Why not discover, what would I say, the potentials that you have within you, the beyondness in that way? And I love the way, I see a guardian angel with every human being. I used to think as a child, and this is something I don't think I've ever said, that, I used to think, only the people in where I lived had guardian angels because I was only a child, but now traveling the world and everything, I have never seen a human being, no matter what you think of someone else, without a guardian angel. And to me, that is mind-blowing, because every single human being has a soul, that spark of light of God, because I see the guardian angel there with them, the gatekeeper. And I just love that. So I don't even know if I answered your question.
Wonderful. Thank you. You've written in Angels in My Hair about this ability you have to see angels, and not just angels, actually, other kinds of beings too, which you hint at in that book, physically, as I can see you here on the Zoom screen, and etc. And it's a remarkable account in Angels in My Hair. You said you've traveled all around the world, of course. This being different, I wonder if we might come back to this way in which people react or respond to you, whether or not they're aware of this side of your life. Do you notice it's different in different countries?
How would I say? I suppose maybe I can go back to, in other countries in the world, maybe you're doing an interview with a journalist, and, or maybe you're going to go on one of their TV shows, and, sometimes they would just say, looking at you, Lorna, I know there's something, I can feel it. I know there's something different about you. And then with the other breath, they might say, I don't believe a word, but that never bothers me, because that part doesn't matter. As I said, I'm me. Yeah, people all around the world will comment on that. And sometimes, I give out to God and the angels, because sometimes someone just starts to cry, and then whoever they are, they can be a complete stranger. I'll just go over and give them a hug and say, I love you. It's a question I haven't really been asked before, so I haven't really thought about it in any way. Sometimes I might be in a hotel lobby or in a cafe, and anywhere in the world, and a complete stranger come up and sit beside me and just start to talk. They sometimes would say, I have to tell you this. And they just, how would I say, I have to pour out their soul. I don't know what way to say it, or sometimes I might be somewhere, and how would you say, it's hard to explain, but you could be in a crowded room and you've just walked in, and I always try to hide, because I'm always trying to hide from God as well. I do that all the time. So, but yet you'd always find that, and even when there's others with me, they would notice that people would turn and stare. They turn around and look. It's like they know you have somebody. They may not know you or anything of you. They just turn around and look, or follow you. in that sense. I have never been asked this question before, so in a sense, I'm lost in that way. To me, I'm not different in that sense. I'm not different. I'm just me, you know. And I think mankind, human beings, I think they are incredible. I just see so much more of a human being when I'm looking at them, when I'm in their presence, whether it is on a crowded street or in a cafe or, or I'm giving a talk somewhere. So that's the only way I can answer that question for you. It is, I have got used to it now. I've got used to, people coming over or strangers, or sometimes, being stopped in the street in another country, and I don't even speak their language, and they just take hold of your hand or put their hand on you, and they keep walking. It is odd, it is strange, but it's okay. To me, if it has helped that person, that's all that matters. To me, that's all that matters.
Have you ever met anybody like you, or who understands what you understand, perhaps from a different perspective or through different means, but someone who has access to that same kind of world? And is there an instant knowing there? It must be, if it ever has, you're nodding, and perhaps it has happened, it must be quite a surprise to meet such a person.
What I would say is, every human being has the same access, is that the word you used, to all of those gifts, to all of that knowledge, to all of that wisdom. I don't believe in any way that I'm different in that way. I think I was just educated differently. And yes, I would meet people that, have studied on the subject, of all walks of life. And sometimes it's lovely to, be talking with them, and maybe they'd ask me a question that has been nagging at them, and they haven't been able to find a part of an answer to it. And I would love that. And again, your questions are, that bit different, which is beautiful. But to every question, there's, how would I say, a billion answers. And to every one of them, there's another billion in that way. I always say to anyone who's studying, whether they're a scientist or an analyst, or there's a whole load of names, I can't even pronounce the names. I would always say keep an open mind, because if I'm still learning, you have to be still learning. In that way. And I think it's a fascinating subject, the spiritual side. The knowledge pouring into us all of the time, that we're not just, flesh and blood, we're a spiritual being as well. We're two, we're not just one. And I hope that's helping you a little bit in that way. So I just think with the world today, because people are more educated, more people have gone and studied different things, but I know knowledge is changing all of the time. Like, lots of times we're discovering that the knowledge that has been written is not quite right. And again, it's to be open and not to say to ourselves that knowledge has to be correct. And we know that, because even in science, who was it, the doctor that they locked him up and he died in an asylum because he said, you had to wash your hands when a woman is giving birth. it took us another 100 years or something like that to agree with him. So it's kind of, even when I'm asked, questions about other things I see, that's why I'm always telling people, don't just be looking, be more open and allow yourself to see say you were in the same room with me, what's actually between us. If I can see the air and so many other different things within everything, I don't understand why you can't. I think it was just generations or thousands of years being told, you're only to think in a certain way. You're only to use your brain within a certain way. You're only to use your body within a certain way. Where for myself, I suppose being considered retarded and being put to one side by mankind, I learned differently. So I don't even know if that's answering your question. It's just, again, so much coming in all of the time. We just have to, in a sense, not just open our brain. I know science is looking for the conscious mind and they can't find it. It's not a little bit of flesh in there in that sense. But knowledge is coming in all of the time. We just have to, what I'm being told is, the intertwining of the human body and the soul. That's the spiritual part. That's that spark of light of God. That's where all the knowledge comes in all of the time. And sometimes somebody would ask me, why did God give us a soul? And at times, looking at mankind, I would often say to myself, I don't know why, when I see what man is doing. But at whatever stage, whether we were just a thought of creation, or a little blob, or whatever stage it was, that has made a huge difference between ourselves and even of the animals and all the insects. And yet they are powerful as well, because they affect us. Why I would say God fell in love with us, I'm delighted he did, in that sense. But it's like that intertwining of the human body and the soul coming together. And I know we can do it. I believe in that. And I always remember, a scientist saying to me, Lorna, why do you use the word intertwining? And I said, I've always used the word intertwining. Because that's what God and the angels talk about, is the intertwining. And he turned around and told me that science has been using that word intertwining for a long, 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 long time. And it's lovely just hearing some scientists, some creators, because we're all creators, becoming more open-minded, saying, everything is possible. I always remember one person saying to me, and again, a scientist that I had met, I don't know whether I met him in Dublin or where I had met him, but it was after Angels in My Hair came out. And he just said, Lorna, if a scientist says to you, something is impossible, they're not a scientist, because everything is possible. It's beyond. And I just love that, so it's, we're discovering so much more, because we are incredible human beings. It's like when somebody gets an epiphany, don't throw it away. Don't say, where did that come from? At least write it down, in that way. And that is being a creative mind in that sense, and picking up all of the knowledge coming in, just because the world would say that's a silly idea, washing your hands when a woman is giving birth. again, I would say that man at that time got that epiphany, just knew, didn't know where it came from, and responded to it, washed his hands and found, less women and infants died, but yes, the rest of the medical profession that, rejected that. So I would just say for us all to stay open-minded. I think we are great at creating, and I love technology, but I know I have written, I don't know if it's in Angels in My Hair, the throwback. And that's where we just need to make sure we don't overstep the boundaries between technology and ourselves.
Thank you. It's very interesting indeed. One more question on this theme, and then I'd like to ask you a bit about the angels themselves and that side of things. Have you ever met anybody who could see the angels like you, and you could both say, here's Hosus or here's Michael, for example?
I haven't, in the sense of what you're saying. I've met people who would tell me that they see angels, and then later on I won't say anything. They will tell me that, it's in meditation, or they visualize, or sometimes somebody will turn around and say, at a certain time in their life when something was happening, they saw an angel. And you have to remember, many rescue workers would report where somebody in trouble, would turn around and say, well, where is such and such? That was an angel, or sometimes a mountain climber would say, there was someone walking ahead of me all the time and I was following them, and they got to safety, or they were found, safely. But I've never met, and I would love where somebody would say, where I would see Archangel Michael or Hostess walk in, and somebody would say, oh, I see he's just, and describe the way they look. I love the way they give such a human appearance, and dress in, whatever people are dressed in at that time, but they always look, how would I say, so perfect, so new, and that part is even hard to describe. But I haven't as yet. But you have to remember, when a child is born, they see angels. It's kind of beaten out of them in one sense. If something is not solid, it's not real. So no, not yet. And I would love, I've had, experiences where, I remember a child one time saying to me, Lorna, I have to say I do, because my mom needs the money, and she started crying, she was crying, and I told her, don't worry about it. It's okay. Just do less of it for your mom. She'll find a way, or I remember one time being in this big, huge studio. Don't ask me what part of the world I was in, because to me, the world is just one country. We should be one nation. We should all be working together. And there was, what would you say? They were doing a set or something like that, and it was children, and it was the children to feel, to talk about, feeling all the negative energy. And two of them came over to me and said they love playing the game, but we won't tell them. And I thought that was so sad. We all can feel energy, each and every one of us. Sometimes when you go somewhere and you suddenly feel, unsteady, something doesn't feel good about the place. I always say to people, well, maybe why the place doesn't feel good is because something bad happened there. And, at the moment in the world, there's so many bad things happening. What we have to do is bring back in a little bit of light and hope, a little bit of love. I always say love will conquer everything in the end. Was that the question you asked? I do forget.
Does it matter?
I don't know. It doesn't really, no, not at all.
So I said I'd ask you a bit about the angels and themselves. In your book and in your various talks, you describe different sorts of angels. There are guardian angels. Each of us has one of those. And there are other special sorts of angels. You've mentioned Hossus, a sort of teaching angel in a way, and a companion of yours. Elijah, you mentioned the angel of death. You already here have mentioned the soul of your deceased brother. You mentioned God. In the book, you talk also about the devil. And you write, I'm in a constant battle with the devil. When someone has a very strong faith, the devil tries to make it difficult, and frequently succeeds in the short term. But I know that no matter how hard the evil forces of Satan try to frustrate the work, God and the angels always win in the end. And I wonder if as I think about this array of beings that you encounter, what about demons? Are there such things? And what about land spirits? In many traditions, there are certain spirits of various types who are associated with, say, a sacred mountain or a valley, etc. Do you have contact with those? And what about another class, fairies, little folk, that sort of, those sorts of in-between kinds of creatures that are in many of the world's mystical traditions and mythological traditions and local folk traditions and so on. Do you also have contact with those? So I'm asking you really about the span of and the variety of beings that you have contact with.
The way I suppose I will put it to you is, yes, in all countries, there's so many different traditions, and they go way, way back, and they may be called, the spirit of the mountain, and yes, that can be because of way back in the past, something had happened, something good or something negative, or there was fear or anxiety, and the people prayed or done a ceremony, and whatever happened, they will call the spirit of the mountain, then calmed it in that way. And yes, and sometimes that can just be an energy as such, but other times it's I have to smile. And we call angels by all different names. I would call the spirit of the mountain, that's a particular angel as such in that way. I think spirituality has been with us all of the time, again, because of our soul. So no matter how, as time went on and we developed more humanly, and became more creative, the spiritual side of us, we tried to get rid of it, but yet it would keep coming up in that way. And yes, the negative, which in religion we call Satan, would in a sense pull us down. And that pulling down really comes from mankind itself, because at the moment we have, a lot of wars in the world, lots and lots of threats. And again, it goes back to the past, where we want revenge for the past, and we're not ready to forgive and to let go because we're still hurting too much. But we need to let go, so that in a sense, love will triumphant, kindness and hope, will triumphant over everything, and man will, in a sense, become this unique being, in every way. And even in the old traditional holy, or you might call them spiritual books of long, long ago that have been found, there has been the mention as well in another way, is that all that is unseen. And that is some of the things that you have even mentioned there now. There's not just us as human beings and the grass and the trees and the animals and the insects. There is lots more. Science has, told people over the last, I don't know how many years now, that, the stardust, coming into our planet, the stardust that is out there, the light that's out there. So, yeah, there's more to what you have just said, that is unseen by man's eyes, human eyes. So, in a sense, we have to start to, and I guess God and the angels have taught me to see through the eyes of my soul, but to see through the eyes of my soul, but yet through my human eyes as well. In that way. So I'd be telling people, try not just look around, try and allow yourself to see. And, when you see a child, I have often seen children, say over at a tree or a bush, and, they're not actually putting their hand on the flower or the bush, but they're moving their fingers or they're moving their hand. That's because they're seeing. They're seeing the energy and they're touching it and they're feeling. But then mankind tells them, no, you only see the bark of the tree. You don't see anything else. It's like, I know if I was in the room there with you, how would I say, I see you have two musical instruments. You could put one there and one there, and you should be able to see the energy between both. Where there's nothing, where you're told there is nothing, but where there is nothing, it's full. That's the only way I can explain it. So, yes, all of what you've said there is there in millions and millions of different ways. So I hope that has answered a bit.
Yes, it has. Thank you. And have you had a contact in the same sort of discursive or interactive way that you have with angels, with, for example, land spirits or water spirits or fairy sorts of creatures? There are in many that I'm thinking of the same word in 6 different languages. There are so many of them listed, aren't there? Have you had interactions with them in the same way as you had the angels?
Yes.
Or is it a different sort of thing? Oh, you have.
Oh, it's to me that's normal. You see, for me that's normal. It's like the spirit of the water I call the angel of the water, and when you and it always gives a female appearance when it rises out of the water, and it's so translucent but yet so alive and so full of color. And then when you're like, I don't understand why you can't see what I see. I can't figure that out in that sense. You should be able to. So just say I was at the sea or by a river, and I suddenly turned and looked, and all of a sudden, how would I say it? Balls of energy from the water started to rise. And whatever way they rise, and just watching them. And there's other people around. I find it hard to understand, why can they not see that? Why aren't they standing there or looking, allowing themselves to see in wonder? Like, just because, and another thing I try to explain to people, that everything comes from nature. So literally everything has energy, like even the clothing you have on you, you know, everything around you in that room um, is probably more than like, even though I can't see it on the screen, is probably more than likely giving off different types of energy all around you. And if you're relaxed and good, and how would I say, that energy stays relaxed and good. But if there's something wrong, maybe part of it won't be. In that sense, part of it might be a little bit harder in that way. And sometimes, when you're at a river, or I could be anywhere sitting, or like, I know I keep saying I must write a little bit more about trees. Science hasn't come up with it yet. And I keep saying I'll have to put stuff on tapes to tell them so that it's there. So that when they decide, even if it's in 100 years' time or 200 years' time, they have a little bit of, what do you call it, catalogue to look back at and say, oh yes, are we spotting this? Are we seeing this in that way? Like, it's like the other day, just seeing something, I have to smile, something, what would I say, when it was calm and still, something when I looked across and saw a tree doing something within itself as it talked to another tree. Nature talks all of the time. It's in communication with each other all of the time. And every time, how would you say, our planet is a gift that God has given us. It's a beautiful gift. And we have taken it for granted. When you're given something for free, sometimes you just throw it there. It doesn't matter if it breaks, but nature all of the time is, repairing itself. And it doesn't like to destroy life, because all life is precious to the planet. And I call that lots of people will call, Mother Earth, and I call it, the angel in the center of the earth. She's always twisting and turning. She's like sails, the only way I can describe it, as we as human beings tear it apart. But isn't it incredible? She's kept it together when you think of it. Like, even with wars now, we're blasting out of her. We're doing horrific things, and we're even contaminating the air around us even more in that way. And yet nature is doing everything. The angels are, God is, all other life that you don't see is doing everything to keep everything together. Because everything wants to live.
When we think about different types of spirits, you're talking in very positive terms, but you also talk about less positive entities. I quoted you earlier saying you're in a sort of struggle with Satan quite often. And here you say also that sometimes a person will let Satan enter their life. This can happen through deliberate, malicious intent, or through feelings of jealousy, anger, or a perception that life hasn't been fair to them. For example, Satan frequently gains access to individuals when there is a dispute over property or a will. The extent to which Satan darkens a soul varies. This influence may give that individual what appears externally to be a great life, but it will destroy the lives of those around them. And ultimately, if nothing is done, it will destroy the soul of the person involved. And later you write that over the years, many people have come to visit me who are under Satan's influence to some extent. I'll always see it, because Satan can't resist showing off his presence.
Yes, how would I say, that has happened on many occasions when, somebody would be in front of me in that way. And I would be shown the anger and the hate, the turning. Maybe I can describe it like as the turning within the human person themselves. I think we humanly, we are very weak in one sense, because we take everything so personal, and a lot of the time we don't feel the world is kind enough to us or good enough to us. And we do so many things wrong out of hate, out of anger, out of disappointment in that way. And again, I would say you can see it in the world today. I would just love, how would you say, to let the goodness out more than the badness out. Because again, I would always say the love and the kindness and the hope can conquer all of that, can, change us with that intertwining of the human body and the soul. And that would mean everything in that way. So yes, even when you think of, I've met so many people. I often tell the story of the man, telling me that, in his country, when there was war, children were made boy soldiers. They were made soldiers. And he told the story of, the whole village being taken over and their parents all being killed, just massive. And himself and his little brother survived. And what we might think was wrong, or how could he do what he did, but he did it out of love. His little brother was only about 3 or something like that, very, very young. And even his little brother was being turned into a boy soldier. And they were torturing him. And he described one day he was to kill somebody. And they held his little brother with, I think you call it, a big long knife, one of those things. And they said they would keep cutting him unless he killed this other person with the gun. And out of love, not out of hate or anything like that, he done something. He shot his brother, his little brother. He killed his little brother. But that was out of love. And sometimes people find that hard to see. He said he didn't want his little brother to suffer anymore. And somehow he survived whatever they did to him that day. And then the other miracle that happened was that a few years later, I don't know how many years later, he actually got away. He escaped, and that's why he was alive to tell me that story. So sometimes someone might do something that we might think is horrific, but we don't know the story behind it. And to me, the story behind all of that, of him killing his brother, his little brother, was love. He knew that they would keep torturing his little brother until he himself did everything that they wanted him to do. And that in a sense that they would take away his own consciousness, his own mind, that he would become like a zombie in that sense, in that way. And he didn't want that to happen to his little brother. I don't think his little brother would have survived anyway, by the sounds of it. And sometimes I think, we might be abused in horrific ways. And sometimes that abuse makes us so angry that we become, what would you say, not nice people. We do wrong things, but you have to love them. You have to try and see the story behind it and love them, and try and, like I would hear so many stories from men and women, all ages. And one thing I would always say to them is, try and forgive yourself for what happened, for what you did, because of what was done to you. Forgive yourself so you can forgive. You can forgive what was done to you and change and become better. And it really is hard. It's like people of all ages trying to not take things personal. We take things so personal, and God is asking us not to. We're being asked, I suppose, at this time, because our world is changing, everything is changing. We're stepping, what would I say, spiritually closer to, what would you call it now? Mankind taking the next step of evolution. We're going to change again, but we would love, and I would love, us to change in such a positive and loving way. And I know we can, because I can see, no matter what's happening in the world today, no matter how angry and how much hate is there and all that kind of thing, there's so much good there. There is so much good, and that's the light of hope for mankind. There's so much hope there. There's so much light. There's so much love. We just have to bring it out another little bit. And as we take that next step of evolution, to embrace it, but to embrace it in the most positive way as possible. We keep on changing. And it's like, I do love, I have to say, and I don't know if it's quite answering your question, but I do love that if you go back even to when we think man started, even right up to today, I'm dyslexic, so sometimes it comes out a little backwards. And you just look at it and you see how mankind has changed, the good and the bad, the differences. But each time from the bad, we have come out a little bit better. So I pray and ask that on this change, we come out, not just a little bit better, but more than that we make this part of evolution, this part of change, that little bit bigger. And again, that is the intertwining of the human body, the human person, and the soul. And it all the time goes back to love, compassion, hope. It's, how would I say, the one thing that keeps coming up through mankind all of the time is love, is hope, is compassion, is peace, is empathy, forgiveness. And they're all of the gifts that the whole world wants, everyone wants, even one of them, but they're not for sale. You can't go into a shop and buy them. They're in you. You have them. It's just not to be afraid to show them, not to be afraid to, reach out. Like I would often say, pray for yourself, ask for yourself, your family, your friends, but ask for the stranger. Ask for those who are torn apart and hurt so much that maybe they're doing horrific things because of what has happened to them. So show love and show compassion, and don't allow our world to become that it's normal. It's normal to hate. It's normal to be angry. It's normal to, do horrific things. Let's change for the better, for us all. Sorry, I'm saying too much.
Why are you saying sorry?
Because I'm saying too much.
Too much?
Too much, yes.
Well, I would love to follow up on even that last comment, actually, about saying too much. I wonder what you mean by that. But we have a strict time limit, and that time limit is rapidly approaching. So your publicist asked that I ask you about Sanctuary, the retreat centre that you've opened in Kilkenny, Ireland. And the description of that place is, it's a sacred place where individuals from all walks of life are warmly welcomed for healing, reflection, and spiritual growth. So I wonder, in the couple of minutes we have remaining, if you might say a little bit about the sanctuary, how it came to be, and what it is that you do there.
I love the question, and every time I'm asked that, I'm kind of flabbergasted. I don't know how to answer it, because it's something that God had shown me before, and it's actually a miracle. I don't have money, but a stranger at the time bought it and gave it, because Angels in My Hair did something for them. A miracle happened for them and their family. And Kilfane means sacred place. And I was already told to call it sanctuary. And, I know in the future, what would I say? People won't have to pay to come. But then I just say to God, if that's to happen, others have to give. Somebody out there that has so much has to give. And I was saying to God, how are we going to work that out? There'd be such a queue. And God has just said, it's only the beginning, the start. And I told my son a little bit. I told him that it will be the sanctuary in Ireland will be there for 300 years and more. I didn't tell him the more, because I felt he couldn't take it. I was told he couldn't take it. So it's like a stepping stone for mankind. And I'm losing my voice now a little bit. Just people come from all over the world, all walks of life, professors and all that, a shopkeeper, a mom, a dad, everyone comes, and I just thank God for it. But I don't know everything, in the sense God has shown me loads of things that are to happen there, but I have to let them unfold. God can change anything in that sense. The sanctuary is just an incredible miracle, and the word Kilfane means sacred place. You have to remember, God chose it, not me. None of this is my plan, by the way, or my, what do people say, destiny or dream. This is all God's, by the way. I put it back on God all the time. It's not mine whatsoever. I am just doing what God has asked me to do. I'm just the servant. Okay?
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. And of course, I'll include in the show notes here links to the sanctuary and links to your site, etc. And people can go there and find out more and read Angels in My Hair and all the content you have out there. Perhaps even visit you in Kilkenny, Ireland. Lorna Byrne, thank you very much.
Thank you. And it was lovely chatting.
Thank you for listening to another Guru Viking podcast. For more interviews like these, as well as articles, videos, and guided meditations, visit www.guruviking.com.